Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, a safe space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son, Joey, who's in recovery from addiction and who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better, too. Today's guest is Simon Benn, an adoptee living near York, England, and he hosts Thriving Adoptees podcast. I was recently on his show, so I wanted him to be on our show as well, trading podcasts across the globe. Simon has been on a healing journey for the last 13 or so years after a discovery about his adoption that rocked his world. He wants to help other adoptees move toward healing with his podcast and webinars. So welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Simon.
Thank you, Beth. Lovely to be here. I love talking this stuff. Yeah, this is what it's about.
Yep, I agree. I love going right into it, get into the complexities of it, like my introduction said. So just to give us a brief background, just let us know how old you were when you were adopted, what was your childhood like, that kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, I've just gone 56, 2 weeks ago now. I was adopted at 5 weeks old. I had a good childhood, usual childhood ups and downs, I guess, like everybody else. Quite a lot of bullying, got bullied. Nothing about being adopted, but that knocked me a little bit, I think. And went to college, what we call university, went into the family business. Some tricky stuff working with my dad. Other people had tricky stuff with him, highs and lows. So yeah, my mum and dad told me that I was adopted so young, I can't even remember. I hit 40 and that's when I found out that my teddy bear was from my birth mother. And my mum reckons now that she told me that, but I don't remember being told that.
Okay.
Maybe she's misremembering or something. My first reaction to that was one of curiosity. I wonder why they didn't tell me. And then I was sharing what had happened with somebody a couple of months later, and I had a volcano of anger came out towards my birth mother. Around that time, finally, I got to some business success, and that hadn't really made me happy. It had been like a hollow victory. So within a period of a year or so, I figured that I needed to find out what was going to make me happy, to put it in simple terms. And that kickstarted off my journey, which eventually led me to doing the podcast, having these conversations. And so I learned a lot of stuff about who we are, I guess a spiritual journey or a midlife crisis. So if I'm in a good mood, I'd say it's a spiritual journey. If I'm in a bad mood, I say it's a midlife crisis. It's one of those. It depends.
6 of one, half dozen of the other, right?
Yeah.
Do they say that in England? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm from Iowa.
We do say.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
So I've heard your teddy bear story a couple of times, and I can't quite pinpoint what were you angry about. Were you mostly angry that you didn't know that it was from your birth mother? Or were you angry that your birth mother gave you the teddy bear but didn't keep you? You know what I mean?
Well,
or maybe both of those things.
It's 15, 16 years ago that happened now. So how accurate my memory is,
Sure.
but it would be definitely in the latter.
Okay. So not so much like, I didn't know this, but.
So probably the initial reaction was curiosity about not being told. Right?
Okay.
Not anger about not being told, but curiosity.
Yeah. The anger was about.
So the curiosity was, why did my mum and dad tell me? And the anger that came up later was directed towards my birth mother. So the words that came out of my mouth without the swearing, right, was that she didn't love me enough to keep me. And the teddy bear was a consolation prize. Yeah. And what I found out probably, 8 or 9 years later was the teddy bear was definitely not a consolation prize. It was a symbol of her love for me.
Oh, how did you find that out?
I got my adoption file, and it was the file from the agency, which was in Liverpool, which is about 80 miles west of where I am, near York. So I got the adoption file, and it had the letters from my birth mother before I was born to the agency. And it had all the notes from the social worker in the meetings, and it had letters from the agency to my mum and dad, had letters from them back. And it had a letter from my birth mother, which she wrote 4 days after relinquishing me for the second time. So she had, I believe I was in short-term foster care, and then she collected me from there. So she had to give me up twice, which must have been incredibly painful for her. And that pain is in the letter. So 4 days after she handed me over, or whatever you want to call it, she wrote a letter to the agency saying that she'd wanted me to have a little something from her, a teddy bear, but she hadn't. On the trip from the foster family, whatever, to the agency, the traffic had been really bad. So she couldn't stop at the store to buy this teddy bear, and she still wanted to buy it. So this letter was kind of laced with grief, desperation, and love. And as I read it, I just flooded with tears, and those tears flooded away it's hard to believe, but 40 seconds of anger towards her that I was conscious of. Just 40 seconds. But they're 40 very painful seconds. And they were washed away by my tears as I read this letter, sensed her grief, felt her love for me. And I felt that we were actually as one. I was reconnected with her in this moment. And my life in the last 15 years has been a series of big epiphany moments. That's probably one of the biggest, and the one that captures what went on. Other internal changes within me, new insights that I've had. When I explain them to people, they really don't land for them. But that one seems to land. It's been, as I say, a series of revelations. And I've just done a podcast with an adoptee called Leah Cooper, and we were talking about revelations. I said, I love revelations on this show. She says, I have them every day.
Oh, wow.
So it's not once and done. It's a series of revelations and a series of epiphanies, epiphanies, insights, eye-opening moments, heart-opening moments.
And I think particularly for adoptees that don't have all of their information, if you had known about that teddy bear and the origin story, or had seen that letter when you were 12 or 20, I wonder, you can never go backwards, I know, but God, if you had more information when you were younger, do you think that would have helped?
I don't know. And to be honest, I didn't have a problem. I wasn't aware of any adoption trauma.
Okay.
People say, well, it's subconscious, and then it came up, but who knows? I was going through a tricky time at work at that point. Who knows?
Yeah.
I say this a lot, actually. Shrinks can make anything link with anything.
Sure.
And human beings as a whole, we can make anything link with anything.
But it seems like a visceral response you had when you found out about the teddy bear.
It was a visceral response. It was a totally visceral response. Yeah, it was. And I had a similar response. I had a similar feeling, perhaps not as pronounced, just talking to a fellow adoptee last week. Something calmed down in the space between us. I was just doing it on the Zoom call, right? 4,000 miles away in the world, 18 inches away from each other's screen, and yet totally as one, that sacred space where there's no sense of separation, a shared experience of being one.
So feeling that connection so deeply.
Yeah. And as I said to Leah half an hour ago, I've had that experience in rock concerts, seeing the Killers. I've had that experience in rugby matches, listening to the national anthems being sung by two teams, a Scottish team and a French team. And I'm not Scottish and I'm not French.
Power of music, though.
The music interrupts. Well, we project the feeling of oneness on the music. You know, have you ever been hiking or you've been in nature and the view takes your breath away? Yeah. And you get a feeling, a visceral feeling of oneness and awe.
Sure.
Okay. Well, we've all had that and we've all projected it on our environment when actually it's really a revelation of who we are and our oneness, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Well, I recently listened to your webinar about the primal wound. I wasn't able to attend it live, but I listened to it on the recording, which I think is available publicly, right?
It is, yeah. The YouTube recording, and it's available. There's an audio on my podcast as well. Maybe you could put the link in the show notes to the video.
I'll definitely do that. It was very interesting. And at first I was like, oh, don't attack the primal wound, because it had such a huge impact on me and transformed the way I thought about my son's life, really, and the way I respond to him. And, you know, it just was so transformative. So I felt very protective of that book. But at the same time, I loved your challenges to think differently about it. Do you want to just quickly explain your ideas about the primal wound and how you'd like to kind of reshape that metaphor?
Well, I thought it explained everything as well. It was transformative for you. And when I read it, I thought it explained everything. Yeah. And then I thought, well, What's wounded? Literally, what is wounded? It's a metaphor. So what's wounded? So can I ask you that question? If you were to sum it up in a word or a sentence, what is it that's wounded?
Well, before listening to your webinar, I would have said that my son's soul was wounded.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's your premise, is that the soul cannot be wounded yet, right?
It depends what you mean by soul, but I think what I'm making the distinction of is the difference between how we feel and who we are.
Oh, okay. I see.
How we feel and who we are. So have I felt wounded? Have I felt primarily wounded? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have, definitely. Have I been primarily wounded? Well, that depends what you mean by the word I.
And your version of I is?
My version of I is consciousness. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it nature. It's the ineffable thing. Because consciousness isn't a thing, we can't find it.
Yeah, you can't grab it and look at it.
We can't grab it, So we need metaphors. So I guess my metaphor would be, and it's not my metaphor, I name check the guy all the time on my podcast, a guy called Rupert Spira. So his metaphor is the fact that we're the screen on which our experience is being played.
Like a TV screen.
Yeah.
So our physical embodiment is just our unique representation of spirit in this lifetime, something like that?
Well, this is quite an intriguing and could be a bit of a rabbit hole conversation to go down. On the webinar, I put forward different metaphors that I think represent trauma better, more accurately. And those perhaps would be an easier place for your listeners to go rather than me getting very, very esoteric. So the metaphor I use a lot because my trauma manifested as anger, should we say, right? So the metaphor that I use a lot is this metaphor of a clenched fist. Clenched fist is punching somebody out of anger. Yeah.
Sure.
It's white knuckled. Yeah. And it's tight and it's closed and it's against the world. It's railing against the world. It's railing against the past. Why did this happen to me? Why didn't my birth mother love me enough to keep me? It's angry. It's furious. It's venomous. It's not happy at all. It's not a happy bunny at all, as we say, right? So the innate position of the hand is not clenched. So if I unclench my fingers, as in I'm going beyond the trauma, so the fist is a metaphor for the trauma. If I unclench my fingers, then Beth will start to get sight of a cut glass diamond that was hidden by my trauma. So that diamond is my metaphor for consciousness, for who we truly are. And if this glass diamond has a value of £7, about whatever it is, $8 maybe, when I bought it off Amazon, but every metaphor has its limitations. Sure. I'm guessing your son is priceless to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so he has infinite value. And so do we all. But, a glass diamond is £7. If this was a real diamond, it might be, I don't know, 20 million pounds, who knows? But the thing about the fist is however hard I squeeze the diamond, if I close my fingers again and I'm squeezing the diamond, however hard I squeeze, I cannot damage the diamond. However much trauma, complex trauma, all the different stuff, all the stuff that we go through, that cannot crush who we are.
I love that.
The other thing about the diamond is if I'm to open my hand out again and I'm transferring the diamond to my other hand, right? If I take a knife, I cannot cut that diamond with a knife.
Right.
So if I can't cut the diamond, there is no wound. If there is no wound, there is no blood. There is no scar. There is no need to go to the ER or what we call A&E, accident and emergency. There is no need to put any plaster or for sutures or stitches or anything. And that's essentially what I'm saying, that who we are is unwoundable. The feelings, have I felt wounded? Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
Have I felt wounded? Yes. But I am not my feelings. We are not our feelings. Our feelings come and go. So anything that is intermittent, the truth is always true. It doesn't change, right? The essence of who we are is unchanged by the feelings that we've felt, the thoughts that we've thought, the trauma that we've experienced.
I love that metaphor. A couple of reasons I love it. According to your metaphor, then the healing work is kind of removing the layers that are piled on top of that diamond. It's not changing who you are at the core.
It's not removing, it's just seeing through them.
Oh, seeing through the layers and getting to the core diamond.
Yeah, it's an unfolding. It's an insight. That's why I love the word revelation. So when I usually use the word epiphany or insight or eye-opening moment or epiphany, right? I love the fact that she used the word revelation because the diamond is revealed by me unfolding my fingers. So it can happen in an instant. This is really important. Well, so I've broken my wrist a couple of times. I've had bad cuts to my legs, and you have to wait for them to heal. Okay. If my metaphor is a more accurate way of looking at it, the healing happens in an instant. It happens in an instant. It happens as we see who we truly are.
I've had those experiences before where all of a sudden things are clear. EMDR has helped me with that tremendously. And it happens very quickly. It can happen very quickly. I suppose sometimes things move slowly, but healing, emotional or spiritual healing, can happen very quickly if one is ready and open to it, I suppose.
Let's just assume that people are open to it because they're listening to the podcast.
That's right. They're listening to the podcast. So they're interested in understanding better about adoption in general. And now you're not discounting someone's trauma. Obviously, you're saying that you have felt it deeply, the amount of anger that emerged from you on that day when it hit you about the teddy bear. So you're not discounting that there is trauma, this clenched fist. It's just that underneath all that is the pure spirit that is connected to everyone and everything, right?
Correct. I am categorically saying there is trauma, and I'm also categorically saying that we are not our trauma.
Yeah, I love that. And another thing that I am trying to work out in my mind as an adoptive mom of a son who's struggling deeply is that he has inside of himself everything he needs to heal. That diamond is whole and complete inside, right? Inside that metaphor of yours. And it's a matter of helping him find his own inner resources, what will click for him, because what I would use to heal and what he would use to heal might be very different. But I think that every single person has exactly what they need within themselves to heal. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they need to see it for themselves.
Yeah, it's hard. As a parent, you just want him to just do this or do that, and you'll feel so much better and it'll be fine. And I'm learning, he's 19 now. We've been on this struggle bus for several years. And I'm learning that I could give him the most amazing resources like this book, The Primal Wound, or spiritual guides, or this or that, a million different things I've tried to offer him, just the right words or whatever. Nothing's going to hit until and unless he's ready, and it needs to fit for him, And so just allowing that healing to occur, it's kind of excruciating at certain times, watching someone you love being in so much pain, but it's his journey and it's his diamond to unclench, to find his core.
There's no such thing as a secondhand insight.
I heard you say that on the webinar. That's interesting. Can you expound on that a bit?
Yeah, I came up with it a couple of years ago. I was chatting to one of my wife's best friends, and we were talking about the nature of insights. And I came up with this. There's no such thing as secondhand insight. So we have to see something for ourselves. Right? Yeah. So the way I normally explain this, if we shift out of the adoption space for a minute to go a bit more general, and hopefully not too strange. So the word educate comes from the Latin word educare, which means to draw out of people. Okay? It does not mean to shove information into their heads.
Memorize this, memorize that, right?
But so that's our view. So our job is to, for example, I've had a lot of coaching. I continue to have coaching. A coach will ask a question, and a question ends with a question mark. The question mark looks a little bit like a hook, and it draws the answer out of the person. So instead of trying to plant an idea in his head, plant an idea in her head, we draw their insight out of them. And we're actually drawing it probably from their subconscious. Mm-hmm. And then when they say it, it's probably the first time that they've heard it.
Right.
And then it becomes conscious for them.
And they could have heard those exact same words from 100 people, but until it becomes from within themselves, it doesn't feel like an insight, perhaps.
It isn't an insight. An insight is a sight from within.
An inside job, right?
Yeah, not an instruction from without.
So our task as humans with souls is to find what works for us, find our own insight, whatever that looks like, right? Is that how you feel like adoptees particularly can heal, is they have to go on their own journey, figure out what works for them, that kind of thing?
It's their own journey back to who they already were.
Yes.
So again, I'll credit Rupert Spira on this. We take off our clothes at night and they reveal who we are. They don't make us who we are. Mm-hmm. They reveal. So one minute the diamond is visible, then it's hidden by some trauma, then it's revealed. It's a revelation job that who we truly are is veiled by the thoughts in our head and the feelings in our heart. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have for an adoptee who might just be coming out of the fog, as they say, might just be realizing that they might have trauma from their adoption, even if they had the most wonderful adoptive parents? What advice would you have for someone that's on the path, that's a seeker?
Stop looking, you're already there. On one level, perhaps not the most hopeful thing. Find somebody ahead of you on the journey and go where they are. There's a lot of people out there in the adoption space who are still bleeding from their primal wound. Mm-hmm. And yet they put themselves forward as leaders. And that really concerns me.
Are you talking about the toxicity that's out on social media particularly?
I'm talking about people that haven't healed, leading others.
Yeah.
So I want to learn from somebody that's way ahead of me on the journey, not still bleeding.
Do you believe, is there an end point before you die? Is it possible to heal from adoption trauma?
Well, I believe that the diamond is always whole, that the need to heal is based on the belief that we're wounded. And if we're not wounded, there's no need to heal.
Okay, so maybe my sense of the healing is to unclench that fist. The revealing is what I'm considering the healing then in your metaphor.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And so it's seeing, there's the journey, there's seeing the diamond for the first time, and then there's remembering it's there. So we see the diamond, we lose sight of it, we get lost, lost in thought, who we truly are. We are lost in thought. We are lost in our trauma. The diamond is hidden. So one minute we see it, the next minute we don't. And life becomes about seeing it more of the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. Finding people that have done a lot of work and thought about these things deeply, and follow those people that you connect with that have forged a path ahead of you. And I think that adoptive parents, it is very advisable to do the same thing, to follow adoptees that are on the healing path and learn from them, listen to them, listen to what they are saying, listen to what they need, what they needed. And I think it would behoove us all to do more listening and thinking deeply about these things.
Yeah, in any walk of life, we find somebody that's ahead of us. So there's this guy, an English hero of the early 2000s, who kicked England to victory in the Rugby World Cup. He now coaches. So that's where we want to go. We want to find somebody that's achieved what we want to achieve and listen to them. But listen to them, ask them questions, get to our own truths. We're not going to be blind slaves or followers to what they say, but they will give us some pointers along the way. And there's a million ways to do this stuff, whether it's therapy, coaching, learning from people with lived experience, books, videos, audios, podcasts. It's like, well, whatever works, whatever moves you further on, whatever deepens our understanding. And it's marinating in it.
Yeah. Some people write poetry or songs or...
Yeah, I started doing some poetry last week.
Did you?
Did you see?
I didn't see it. Do you want to share a poem?
I've written one poem in life when I was about 10 and had to do it for English homework. But yeah, I wrote two poems. I wrote one on Saturday and one on Sunday last weekend. another adoptee who saw the first one said, any more? And I said, do you mean some more verses to the poem that I've written? Or do you mean another poem? She said, another poem. So I just sat down and pegged it out.
Would you like to read one?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea. Here we are. So it's called Beneath. Your fist fast in fury, white-knuckled in fear, tight and terrified in trauma, locked and alone. Fingers loosened to offer a glimmer, dancing light shards. Fingers unfurl, sparkles grow, light rushes in and bounces back. Palm flat and open reveals, shed of trauma nature clear, unveiled majesty shining for all, priceless, precious stone.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's your first poem or your second poem since you were 10?
That's my second poem since I was 10.
Wow. Okay. So there's some more poems coming out of you, I'm sure.
Do you want me to do the next one? I can do the next
one.
Yeah,
sure. Sure. Let's do the other one.
After the fog, numb, cocooned, ignorant in the fog, unable to see what's close by, what's right in front of my nose, staring me right in the face. The fog lifts in a life-changing instant, furious storm, clouds revealed. Angry, scared, tears deluge, threaten the ground beneath. I'm hanging on in for the clouds to blow by, white-knuckled in fear of being washed away, alone in the freezing rain. When on earth will it stop? A gap in the clouds appears and expands, relief, joy, and peace. Then the stunning shock. I'm the sky. An ominous cloud appears. Here I go again. Then the shock. I'm the sky. A cloud appears. Will I go again? Then the surprise. I am the sky. And so are we all.
Oh, that is profound. I think that there's a book of poetry coming out within the next year or so. You know, I think when Nancy Verrier wrote The Primal Wound, it was so revolutionary for the time, which was the mid-90s, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's time for a new metaphor. You know, there's plenty of room for plenty of books and ideas, and maybe it's time to start thinking of a different paradigm. And I think you've gotten us all to think. I think that we have room for all these different ways of viewing it. And, you know, some of these ways will hit different people easier than others. So I think what you have to offer is very valuable. In your podcast is Thriving Adoptees, which is a beautiful name because that's what you want adoptees to do, right? That's your whole point, is to help people thrive and not just sit in it.
Yes.
Not sit in the trauma, to get up and out of it as much as possible, right?
Yes. And the podcast is me interviewing increasingly now adoptees about what's helped them thrive. So it's not me spieling all my metaphors all the time, right? I drop them into the conversations that I have, clearly.
Well, thank you, Simon, so much. If people want to reach out to you or find your podcast, what's the best way for them to find you?
Thrivingadoptees.com. There's a link there. You can listen to the podcast online there, or put Thriving Adoptees into the search of iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you use.
All of them. Okay, very good. Well, I encourage you all to go find Simon's podcast. He's doing great work over there, and deep thinking and deep feeling and deep discoveries about adoption. So head over there, and I suggest that you share this episode with anyone you know who might be coming out of the fog, who might be struggling with their adoption trauma, who might need some different viewpoints, some different ways of thinking about it, and some encouragement to think of themselves as that diamond that's impossible to wound. So please share this episode and find Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. And we are also available on all the podcast apps, and you can find us pretty easily. And we also have a Patreon account if you would like to support us with a few dollars a month to help us keep commercial-free episodes happening. That's patreon.com/unravelingadoption. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks again, Simon, for coming on and sharing your story and sharing your deep insights with us. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thanks again for listening, everyone. And Simon and I want you all to stay safe.